Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the classroom at Flight 93 National Memorial. This memorial is where we honor and remember the 40 passenger and crew members aboard United Flight 93. I'm so happy that you chose to join us today on this very miserable day. So welcome to those of you who are here in person, and also to those who are joining us virtually. They were the smarter ones to stay in out of the rain today. So today, my name is Donna Gibson, and I'm the executive director for the Friends of Flight 93 National Memorial. We're the philanthropic partner to the Park Service, and we help the park be able to do programs like this that they would not be able to do without our assistance. When we visit places of remembrance, we see objects, images, and we hear stories that help us understand not just what happened, but who the people were. Stories are carefully preserved, protected, and shared for today and future generations. Our guest today is Betsy Keene, curator for the 5 national parks in Western Pennsylvania, to include Flight 93 National Memorial. She is a steward of history, making thoughtful decisions about what to collect, preserve, and share. Today, we'll explore caring for objects with emotional weight, how everyday items become powerful symbols, and why preserving these stories still matters. Welcome, Betsy.
Hi, thank you, Donna.
You're welcome. So, Betsy, what does a curator do?
So a curator cares for the museum collection in a museum. Let me see. No? Wait, what am I pointing at? I'm so sorry. Do I have to be on the other side?
That's where
Turn it in. Oh, no.
There it is.
There it is.
Okay. So the curator takes care of the collections that are both on and off exhibit. In any given museum, on average, only about 3% of the collection is on exhibit at any given time, which means there's a vast number of objects that the public don't see. And so it is our responsibility to care for them and to keep control of them, both physically, so that we make sure that they're safe, that we know where they are, that we know that they're being, preserved and looked after, but also intellectually, so that we know what they are, that we can prove ownership of them, that we know the full story of them, and all of those kinds of things. So to do that, we do a number of different things. On any given day, I could be cataloging an object, which is, giving it a unique number and taking down all of the details about it. I could be working with a donor on incoming objects and doing accessioning paperwork, which is the process by which we formally admit objects into the collection. I could be doing research on the objects, both either, for an internal request that's coming maybe from Interp, or something that I want to know, or something that the public has contacted me about. I get research questions from the public as well. I could be working with conservators who might be coming to do a survey on our objects and later to treat them. We also monitor the environment, both temperature and humidity and pest levels and light levels of where all of our objects are. We do inventory and photography. So there's a lot of work to be done on the collections at any given time.
Awesome. So how do items become part of your collection, Betsy?
So mostly here at Flight 93, we receive objects from donors, and what we decide to collect is dictated by our scope of collection statement, the cover of which is here, which is updated every few years or more frequently as needed. The scope of collection statement says what is appropriate for us to collect and what isn't. And it is based on our enabling legislation as a memorial, as well as what our interpretive themes are. So if something falls within the scope of collection statement, we usually take it to what is called our collection advisory committee, which is a group of individuals. So it's not just me with stakeholders who are stakeholders in our collection. So our chief of interpretation, our superintendent, the chief of resources, they all advise on it. and they look at a object and whether or not it's appropriate, and then we'll go through, the formal accessioning process if they all agree that it's the right sort of fit for us.
Okay. And so do families donate on it?
Yes, we're very fortunate that families will reach out to us and donate objects. Those are many people, myself included, find them to be some of the most powerful objects that we have in the collection.
So I was driving one day about 5 o'clock in the evening, and I get this call from Betsy, who's super excited because she had met with Captain Jason Dahl's family, and they donated one of his hats to her. And like, you would have thought she was a child that somebody just gave her the best toy in the world. She was so excited to have that piece of the collection.
It's an incredible moment when someone shares something that is so personal to them and has such a strong connection to the story, and you know how much it means to them to give this incredible thing to you, and the trust that they put in you, but also the love that they're showing for their family member or their friend or whoever it is. It's such an incredible feeling that they trust you to have this object, and then to have time with that object on your own is just incredible. And knowing that I then get to share it with all of you at some point in the future is just astonishing.
Awesome. So how do you balance history with humanity?
So I really liked this question, and I thought a lot about it, and I wanted to share this slide because I want to talk to you about some of the objects that we've received, and sort of how that all goes. Because what it comes down to is knowing that the process of donating is so personal and so emotional for everybody that approaches you and me or us. And so it all comes down to, showing respect and taking the time to give the objects and the story and the donor the time and the care and the attention that they deserve. So this is a donation that we received from Debbie Borza, who I'm sitting in front of her photo. But she is the mother of Diora Bodley. And Debbie contacted us several years ago, and I was talking to her, and she said, she had so many objects of Diora's, but she didn't really know where to start, and could she have some help? So I ended up going out to California to her house. And I spent several days sitting with her, talking to her about all of the objects and listening to stories about Diora and building that relationship. And it was just a wonderful experience for me. And it came down to, she wanted to spend time to get to know me and to make sure that I was going to treat Diora's, story and in these objects and her, life with the respect and the care that they deserve. And, ultimately she did trust us, which, we're so grateful to have. Yeah. So we have, her student ID, which was recovered from her wallet, and her cell phone, which was also recovered from the crash site, as well as a uniform that she wore when she was an intern at the San Diego Zoo, which I just love because
it shows a lot of her personality.
It really does. Yeah. We also have donations from the family of Lorraine Bay. So, who was the senior flight attendant. So several years ago, before I arrived, Eric Bay had shared this earring with us that was recovered from the crash site. And just 2 weekends ago, it was Mother's Day. I was here with our superintendent and the superintendent of Pearl Harbor National Memorial or Monument. I can't remember which one they are. And then Lorraine's cousin, the Root family, Ed and Nancy. And we were talking about, objects that have been donated and what it means to have these incredibly personal objects. And I was talking about this earring and my intention to put it on exhibit later on. And while we were sitting there, Nancy just took off the earrings that she was wearing and handed them to me and said, "These were Lorraine's. It's this pair right here." And, it was one of those things where she just felt in the moment. And I was like, "Oh my God, are you sure?" Because I never want to pressure, we're not allowed to solicit directly for the collection. I never want to pressure anybody into giving something they're not willing to share, or I don't want them to feel any pressure or later feel any regrets or anything like that. But she said, that just in the moment, it felt so right. So that was one of those, sort of unplanned, but spontaneous and beautiful moments. Yeah,
That's very.
yeah.
So what are some of the things that people misunderstand about your position?
There's any number of different things, but I think the most misunderstood thing about curators and museum collections is the idea that collections come into us and then they sit in a box in storage and nothing ever happens to them, which is just not true. Our collection is very active. We have a lot of research requests, people who want to see things or people who would like photos. Our interp team works really hard to make sure that photos of the collection are, out on our website. We're doing a big project that I'm hoping to talk to you guys about later that will put more of the collections online, but we also have a really active loan program. So around the 20th, we did a couple of major loans. So this one went to the US State Department, who reached out, the American Embassy in London, which is their like flagship premier embassy right now, wanted to do an exhibit on 9/11. And so the State Department curator reached out to me and he said, what objects do you have? What stories can we tell? He wanted to talk about, the strength and the coming together and the resiliency afterwards. So I ended up loaning him everything that you see on this page. We have a helmet from one of the Shanksville Volunteer Fire Department, uniform boots from FBI ERT, and a crash site ID badge from ERT team leader Andrea Damon, as well as this flag here on the right, which is the one that flew over gate A17 at Newark Airport for a year after, which is the gate that 93 departed from, and then was given to us as tribute, as well as this original turnout coat, which hung on the temporary memorial for years until it deteriorated very severely, and was taken down and put into the collection and replaced with another one. But the State Department really wanted to have these objects on exhibit to tell, the story of resiliency and care and community afterwards. So they paid they very kindly had the turnout coat conserved for us, and the flag was rehoused, and they featured these in London, which was a really incredible moment for us. We also loaned objects. This is at the US Army Museum. Bill Cashman was an Army veteran, and so they wanted to make sure that his story is included in their 9/11 exhibit. And on the right is the National Law Enforcement Museum in DC, who borrowed Andrea Damon's uniform, as well as some objects that were recovered from the crash site in 2018 in the UA project, which I think I'll talk about in a little bit. But that's a beverage cart bottom and some airphone pieces. So the collection is not static. So even though, the biggest misconception is that things go into storage and you'll never see them again. Nothing could be further from the truth. They are, cherished and appreciated. They are, loaned out. They're used for research, for teaching tools, all that kind of thing.
And so, Betsy, I know for our educator symposium that's coming up in June, we're featuring a book, and you have the oral history from the author of that book, which we will use. So we're using it as part of education and continuing to tell the story of the people who were involved here. So we have a lot of, how many oral histories do we have?
895 total, 735 of which are available to the public. All you have to do is email me. I'll share my email with you all later.
So how has the collection evolved since 2001?
The collection has changed so much since it first started. Wait. Am I out of order? That's fine. I'm just gonna skip ahead a little bit in the slides. Sorry. So the collection started with tributes that were left here at the memorial. So folks started leaving tributes on September 11th, and they continue to leave them today. We have a massive tribute collection, And they are wonderful objects that show so much, emotion and care and a sense of community. Right now, we have a backlog of uncatalogued tributes that numbers about 45,000 objects. We have over 50,000 tributes in total. And so one of the big changes is that we no longer accept and then add these tributes to the museum collection. Folks are still welcome to leave them, but we no longer add them to the museum collection because we have so many other wonderful objects that, there's a limited amount of resources that we have to care for objects, be it, time or space or, whatever. So we focus on other things that have come into the collection. So in 2018, the Park Service acquired from United Airlines the remains of the wreckage of 93. A team of Park Service curators, my predecessor included, who is Bryn Bender right here, as well as FBI agents, representatives from the families, went through this, the wreckage. They looked at every single object and they retained about 800 pieces for the collection. The largest of which arguably are the two engine pieces up here in the top right. So that is the high and low pressure turbine cores that got sort of smashed together from each engine. So the introduction of these pieces to the collection and the results of this incredible project that they did are one of the big changes. We've also started receiving donations from families of the 40 passengers and crew, as well as, friends of theirs. So this is Richard Guadagno and a couple of the objects that his sister donated to us a few years ago that I'm hoping to put on exhibit very soon, but it includes his uniform jacket. He worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, as well as a stained glass that he made because he's an incredible artist. We have also received objects from investigators and support personnel who worked at the crash site. So a number of these are hats, and so I chose to represent everybody in hats. So we have an ATF helmet. This is Captain Walker's helmet from Shanksville Volunteer Fire. He's the one we loaned to London. A helmet from the FAA, one of the FAA investigators who worked on the site, and then in the top right from United Airlines scene team who responded to us, and they brought these hats for everybody that was working there. So we've been, I'm starting to flesh out that story as well. And then we have our oral history collection as well, which you mentioned before, which is an incredible resource and has been, growing and growing and growing over the years. We've also recently received a donation from Newark Airport. So they renovated Terminal A a few years ago, and it was a sort of 3-year process to secure this donation with a lot of discussions about what they would give us, whether it would be the entire jet bridge or, something that was a much more representative sample. We ended up with this sign, which was over the jet bridge. So everybody that went through A17 to board a plane walked underneath this. Adam Schaefer and I went down to Newark last year to receive it. They had a wonderful sort of handover ceremony, and it's now on exhibit. This is me and my coworker Maddie installing it in the visitor center, so you can go and see it there now. So it's the growth of being able to tell so many more stories that is really wonderful.
So how are items cared for long term? I mean, there's a lot of items there. You would think they would break down or get ruined.
They do. So all objects are subject to the agents of deterioration, which is, what museum people call the inherent vice of objects that are, sort of slowly deteriorating from things that we can't stop. We can't help it that, things were manufactured with materials that aren't necessarily, intended for long-term use. They're, subject to light degradation, temperature and humidity fluctuations are bad for them. They'll get attacked by pests, so we work to mitigate these as much as possible. And then, with secure and stable housing and storage. So improving your storage is one of the best things that you can do for your collection. And I've been very fortunate to be able to do that. But one of the other things that we do is we work with conservators. So this is one of the engine turbine cores that we were talking about. This is that recently went through conservation, and by recently I mean like 5 weeks ago. So I'm very excited about this project still. Here behind me is what it looked like before treatment. It was still covered in the dirt and the dust. It's got some green growth that we don't really know what it is. She took some sampling and it's gone off for testing. And there's some pink and white corrosion as well. All kinds of, just accretions on here. So the conservator came and she cleaned it and she stabilized the active corrosion and stopped that from happening and treated it and put a protective layering on it. So this is in the middle, halfway through conservation. On the left is where she hasn't cleaned, on the right is where she has, and that there's a stark difference there. You can see right down the middle where she hasn't done her work yet. And in doing so the picture behind Donna there is the final product. It is cleaned, it is stabilized. You can see this green corrosion has been removed. All of the dirt on the surface there, which was, abrasive, it was acidic, it was going to deteriorate all the metal, is gone. So that is one of the ways in which we work really hard to conserve the collection. And we have the, other parts that have gone out for conservation and that will be getting similar treatment soon.
Very cool. And I do know from working here that if the air conditioning is broken at the museum, Betsy's here right away, taking things out of the collection so that they don't get ruined or disintegrated because of the lack of the right environment. So we appreciate that so much.
It's something that we keep an eye on and, try to make sure that we have our exhibit cases are really lovely. They have really great micro chambers or microclimates inside of them. And we keep, desiccant silica gel in them and everything like that to make sure that nothing gets too humid.
So how does your work support education? I think we touched on it a little bit, but I'm sure you can expand on that.
Yeah. So my work, I see my job as helping to preserve the stories and the personal connections or collections that are related to Flight 93. So I love history. I'm a massive dork. But I will be among the first to admit that sometimes, not always, and with all love and respect to my former teachers, sitting in a classroom listening to a lecture day after day can get a little bit dry. But it's the stories, it's the personal things that you find in a museum with objects, with photographs, with oral histories that allow you to make that personal connection. And so especially as 9/11 passes out of living memory, it is the stories that these objects capture that are going to help future generations connect to the story. So one example that I want to give, and I'm sorry to everyone online that this is creating a lag for, but I want to talk about, I mentioned that we were updating our website. So this is one of the projects that I'm working on this year with our interpretation division. Our website has bios for all of the 40 passengers and crew. Traditionally, they have looked like this, but we have such wonderful things in the collection now for these individuals that we wanted to flesh out the page and make sure that more of them is seen. So we're including excerpts from the oral histories, as well as family photos that have been shared with us, and then some photos of objects. So, it's one thing you can sit there and learn about who Lauren Catuzzi Grancolis was in her life from a single paragraph. But then if we add to that and I show you these photos of her with her family and we look at, some of the things that her sister and her husband said about her, she starts to become, even more of a real person and you connect to her in a new way. And then if I tell you the story of the time that Lauren, when she was working for Price Waterhouse, which was an accountancy firm, they went to pitch to a potential new client, Joe Boxer, as in an attempt to get the account with them. And Lauren, before they all went into the meeting, stood and with the Price Waterhouse executives and said, brought out all of these sort of colorful and fun boxers and said, put these on over your suits. And they were like, what? And she said, do it. And they walked in with these boxers over their suits, and the owner gave them the job on the spot. So I don't even care what you're going to say. You understand us. And so knowing that story, and then these are the boxers that Lauren wore in that meeting, that allows you to make a connection that you're not likely to forget. So these stories help tell these objects and these stories help make personal connections with future generations that they're not going to forget in the same way. And we're so glad to have these boxers. Her husband told me when he donated them, he said, I can't imagine anything you could put in the museum collection that would make her more proud. So it's great. And I want to share one more story with you. So this is Tom Burnett. He was the senior vice president and chief operating officer of Thoratech, which was a company that makes, and here's where I don't understand medical science and technology, but it has something to do with heart valves. But it is a life-saving piece of technology that, sort of saved so many lives and sort of changed the industry. So I can tell you all of that about Tom, but if I show you his business badge and the mug that sat on his desk, he kept his pens and pencils in it. That's, another level of connection. If I tell you then that he designed this logo because he wanted it to be a heart, but he wanted it to be a more medically accurate heart. So the circle represents the 4 chambers of the heart in a way that the sort of, Valentine's Day heart doesn't, you get an even more of a connection. And then on the day that, so the Thoratech executives had a meeting in February of 2001 because they had merged with Thermocardio Systems. And it was a very big deal for them. And so they had a big meeting about it. And at that meeting, Tom gave a speech, and his Dina, his wife, has shared a copy of that speech with us. And I want to sit here while you're looking at these pictures of Tom and thinking about, who he was and what he did on 9/11. I want to share this quote from it with you guys. He said, "What we accomplish in our life, our pursuits, our passions, echo in posterity through our children, our neighbors, and ultimately in our souls. Treating people that would otherwise die has a resounding effect on those around us. The struggle to preserve life enriches all of us, and our humanity is fortified by the process. To deem life important and to act affects all that bear witness to it." So
That's Tom.
Yeah, that's very much Tom Burnett, but that's a connection and a preservation that, you can't just get from dry facts. And that's what a museum collection will do.
Right. Very cool. So this is going to be a top one. So is there any particular part of the collection that has moved you personally?
Well, the quote that I just shared from the speech, I actually typed up and stuck on the wall over my desk. I share it with as many people as I can, but it's the same, I think, the same sort of objects that strike the public, that strike the rest of the people that work here. And it is varied. It depends on, what I've been learning about recently, what I've been, researching. It's the personal objects that make the story real. It's the objects that show the strength and the courage of the 40. It's objects that reflect the love and the kindness that came into this community as a result of it, in the investigators, in the volunteers, in the families, that came here to show love for their loved one, but also to, each other, and the support, and, continuing to this day. It really all depends on, somebody's personal experience and where they're at and what they connect with. But it's hard to pick just one.
I know. Well, it's interesting because I was being interviewed a little earlier, and the cameraman said, and how about the Superman figure? Like, everybody knows Louis Nacky and the Superman figure. It's just one of those things that if you've been here, you know that.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
So what what would be one thing that you would like a visitor to take away or to remember?
I mean, I think it's the same thing that, everybody that works here wants. We want them to remember that these 40 were heroes, that they were so incredibly brave, but also that they were individuals, that they were 40 unique people, that they were more than just that one day, that they were, nuanced and they had their own, lives, and that there's more to them than just that one than that day. That's, I think, what I would like them to take away.
Okay. So Betsy, I know that you have a new collection that's a new display case that's on its way. So can you give our audience a little sneak preview of what might be in that collection?
So we've got 5 new cases that are coming. So I am really looking forward to this upcoming exhibit.
We were hoping it was going to be available today, but unfortunately that.
Designing and manufacturing custom cases, while incredibly fun, if you're a nerd like me, is not a fast process.
Yeah.
So, but we are going to be featuring objects that have been shared with us by the families of the 40. So, personal objects like, the mug and the badge here that will help, I hope, help folks connect to the story, into the 40 in a really unique way. And it's objects that haven't yet been seen except for in photographs. But I also want to feature, we're planning to have a case that will talk about all of the different organizations and agencies and individuals who responded here at the crash site, because our exhibits do a wonderful job talking about the FBI and then a handful of other, folks, but it was such an incredibly complex event and response. And it's important to me that we talk about everybody or as many people as we can. So I want to have an exhibit. I want to have a case that talks about that. And then we're having a case that talks about communication technology of 2001, because that is something that has changed dramatically in the last 25 years. We saw the picture of Diora's cell phone. Is that, little flip phone? We all remember T9 word texting. But education wise, students today don't really understand the limited capacity of cell phones and what, the technological response was like. So we're featuring objects from the plane, as well as, the military response, the local first responders, all of that, so that we can help them understand what, the technology was like, that we don't have cell phone pictures in the same way that we would today.
So we had a group of arborists who came to help us with taking care of the trees on the property. And Betsy did a presentation to them about how arborists responded during the initial response to the crash site here and the role that they played. And she shared some of their oral histories, which was very interesting. I've been here for 15 years, and it was the first time I had heard any of those stories. And it really, I think, helped those arborists connect with the site more, because those people were real people who were here and responded.
Yep. There's so many facets to this story, and there's so many stakeholders. And I want to make sure that as many of them as possible are represented, so that we can tell as many stories as possible, because now is when the time is to collect and preserve those things, so that, not just people today, but our children, our children's children, our children's children's children, et cetera, on down the line, can understand this story in the same way that we do.
So, anybody have any questions for Betsy?
Are any of these artifacts on the website? And more importantly, the stories that you had to go with these artifacts that can be accessed online?
We're working on it with the passenger and crew pages, as I said, with the boxers. So we're working on updating them as we go. We've done some of them, and we're slowly working through the process of getting them more online. I can't make any promises, but I'm hoping to get the oral history collection online, or at least a finding aid available. from there, it's something that we would love to do, but sort of the amount of work versus, you know, the time and the resources that we have is limited, but it's something that we would love to do. They're such incredible pieces. There's some more examples of conservation that has happened. So on the top is pre-conservation, on the bottom is after. Thought I'd share those. So you can see how we care for them and what sort of the cleaning and the treatment can do. And then that's my contact information.
Yes,
I have a somewhat difficult question.
that's okay.
These are objects.
Yes.
Were there any human remains that existed that would be able to be turned over to the families for some sort of closure?
So there were DNA collected
Mhm.
on each of the passenger and crew members and provided to the family members.
There were remains that were collected in 2001.
Yeah.
They were positively able to identify through DNA sampling all of the 40. Everybody received some amount, but it varied from family to family.
Is there an ongoing search for at the site itself?
We know that we consider the sacred ground a cemetery or a graveyard.
Untouchable.
Yes. But we don't go and actively seek it. We don't tend to go out there except for, you know, mowing and maintenance.
And the National Park Service is wholly and totally responsible for its upkeep and maintenance.
For the site, yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah, the families are the only ones who get to go out to, if you've been here before, there's a boulder that marks the crash site. And so that's all in the sacred ground area, which the public can't go there. It's more for the families, or unless the families invite you to go with them out to the boulder.
And was the aircraft or remains of it ever reassembled in any way, or they just were kept in a warehouse someplace?
United Airlines retained ownership of it until the Park Service took possession in 2018. It was never rebuilt in the same way that you're thinking of with some of the other aircrafts that have been,
Right.
you know, in crashes. It was not in good enough shape to do that.
So you kept like a turbine thing that you showed there.
Mhm.
Those pieces were cleaned up and are on display.
Not all of them, but a portion of them, yes. If you go into our visitor center, there's a, you know, sort of selection of representative samples.
Thank you.
And then the other pieces that were in that warehouse were put in storage containers. And you can see a picture over here of when they brought all of those storage containers here to be buried. The families believed that their loved ones were in there, so they wanted those remains to be buried here at the crash site.
I just want to say, there is a book that I bought after 9/11. I think the title is Out of the Blue.
Okay.
That is probably, in my opinion, the best book about this whole, including Flight 93, and about Tom Burnett and that "let's roll" quote when they were trying to bash down the door to the
The cockpit.
pilot's cabin.
Yeah.
This is a marvelous book.
Have to find out. I don't think of that one. Courtney, do we have any questions from our virtual audience?
We have one question from Beverly, a volunteer ambassador here. She asked, when you sent artifacts to London, how was that done?
Oh, that's a great question. I worked with the State Department Curator, and he brought them over in the diplomatic pouch, which was a thing that I didn't really know about, and I still don't entirely understand. But there are, art shipping companies. So there was a large piece that wouldn't fit in a pouch kind of thing, and so they helped, move the bigger pieces that needed extra preservation, and then he personally carried the rest of them.
Wow. Any other questions?
We don't have any more questions, but we have two comments. Debbie Bortman.
Hi, Debbie.
Thank you, Betsy, for taking such great care of your.
I'm honored.
And then Colleen from the Park Service, she said, excellent presentation, great job.
Thanks, Colleen. That's my boss.
That's her. Yes.
Would you like to see the visitor center expanded so that more of the artifacts can be displayed?
That's a really interesting question. I love the visitor center as it is now, and I can't see a way in which we could, on a practical level, expand the museum. That just isn't possible, I think, in the Park Service world.
Right.
That said, I'm a museum nerd, and I, think that everybody should see. I want to share all of the stories all of the time because they're just so incredible and wonderful. So this is what the joy of, online exhibits and updating the passenger and crew bio pages and all that kind of thing can do, is that, even though we don't have the physical space and none of us can, see that changing, there are other ways to share the stories. So,
Right.
I want all museums to show all of their things all of the time.
Yeah. Well, even the oral histories, like we went through a project with the University of Pittsburgh. I think it might have been before your time, Betsy, about how to catalog and to be able to put all of that information online so that educators, researchers, book writers, they could access it. And it's an incredible undertaking and very, very expensive. So, yes.
We came in probably a little on the later side. Can we find this recording anywhere on the website?
Yes,
or-
it will be on the Friends website. So there's a card at your seat,
Yeah,
and on the back of there is the Friends website. And so we'll have it on there after, it'll probably be up by Tuesday sometime.
gotcha.
You're welcome.
Betsy, did you ask to be assigned to this memorial because of your history buff nerd thing?
I feel seen. So in the Park Service, we apply and compete for all of our jobs. So, it's not like the military where you sort of get sent and assigned anywhere. I submitted an application knowing what these sites were and what the job would be. But this is considered as one, these 5 sites are my 7th park. So, we move around a lot. Yeah.
This is the most moving of all the sites that you've been for the park.
They're all incredible in their own ways. I find ways to connect to the story at every single one, but this is certainly the most recent and the sort of most active collection that I've worked with. And, I've been here the longest, so I've connected with it in a way that, just as a result of that. I'm trying to be very diplomatic about all of my sites.
Thank you.
Betsy, years ago, being an ambassador here, we were told we had probably 90,000 to 100,000 tributes. I don't know if was somebody's figment of their imagination or not, but we had to cull a lot of the tributes that we had in storage. We have. So we're down to about, you say 45,000 or 50?
We have about, it's a complicated answer because it's hard to know, because not all of them are accessioned, which means we don't have full counts on exactly how many there are. So 50,000 is my conservative estimate. on how many we have, based on numbers that were already here when I arrived. I would love to, get a more accurate count in the coming years. But 50,000 is sort of my conservative estimate.
I just wonder because every once in a while, being out there talking to people, they say, what do you do with these? How many do you have? And the whole thing. And I guess I'm looking for a number that I can tell them that's plausible.
So like I said, 50,000 is the conservative estimate. I think we have about 45,000 that are uncatalogued, that are in our backlog.
Okay, so that in addition to the 50,000?
No,
No, that's part of the 50,000.
yes,
Okay,
of that 50,000.
all right, good, all right.
So I should have phrased that better.
Betsy, I thought that Bobby Black from the Somerset Historical Center had collected a lot of those tributes from the fence and that they were lost in a fire. So I don't know if you know that history.
Some of them were lost in a fire, but not all of them.
Yes, so that may be why that 100,000 has been down to 50,000.
It's part of it, but we also don't have a fully accurate count from the fire.
But
Any other questions for Betsy? So, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
The A17 sign,
Yes,
will that be a permanent? I know you move things in and out, change things around, inside, will that be permanently in there?
I mean, we have no intention of taking it out anytime soon. Permanent is like 200 years from now, I have no idea, but for a significantly long time in the future, yes.
At least after the observance.
Oh, yeah. I mean, years. It'll be here for years. Yes, it's a wonderful piece and we're so proud to have it. And it's so striking. And working with Newark Airport on acquiring it and then seeing how they're preserving the memory of 93 was really, really incredible.
Is there anything on display at Newark Airport?
There is I can't remember about the public areas, but in their, staff offices, they have wonderful tributes on the walls there because they also are run by Port Authority, who lost people in New York. So there's, some really incredible and thoughtful things there in their staffing areas. They told Adam and I that they're going to put a marker. So because they renovated Terminal A, it's not, in the same gate. A17 is not in the same space anymore, but they're intending to put a marker in the it's not the runway, but the taxiing area where the nose of the plane was on September 11th when it took off. So they do a wonderful job of preserving the memory. And in the changeover ceremony, which is available on YouTube, many of them gave speeches about sort of what it means to them. And they're thoughtful and wonderful. And I was so honored to be there and that they shared the piece with us.
As far as you know, was there any persons that missed that flight? And
That is a
You've been
whole
interviewed.
story that I'm not entirely up on.
There were people who may have missed, there were people who were on that flight that weren't originally supposed to be on the flight. So I think it's in Jerry Longman's book, Among the Heroes. He talks about the 40 passenger and crew members who had last minute flight changes and things that put them on that flight that morning. So yeah, that's a whole nother story. Yep, yeah. Any other questions? Well, we really appreciate you choosing to be here today. I hope you found this interesting, as I love talking to Betsy and learning the things that she has. And before I retire at the end of September, I'm going to make my way up to where everything is kept and cataloged. So I'm looking forward to that. We have at every one of your chairs a schedule of events that we have planned for this year. So we'll be having other presentations next week, or I'm sorry, in June. I'll be joined by a retired Air Force individual who worked in the Pentagon on September 11th. He was part of the communications team, and a member of the first responders, a leadership group, who they now teach the story of Flight 93 and the courage that those 40 individuals experienced. And they teach that as part of a leadership program. So they're going to talk to us about why these 40, why they choose to do what they're doing now. And then virtually in June, and I don't think it's on our schedule, but did we get Paul Murdoch in there?
Yes.
Yeah. Is it on there? Yeah, so we'll have a virtual conversation with the architect for Flight 93. And he'll be talking to us about why the design is the way it is, what inspired him to create this memorial in the way that it's created. And then in August, we will have Garrett Graff, who is the author of The Last Plane in the Sky. And Garrett, that book in itself is a collection of oral histories. So Garrett and I will discuss, like, why are oral histories so important going forward, especially as we're going from a lived memory to its history now for over 100 million people have been born since September 11. We have educators in classrooms who weren't alive on September 11th. So it's incredible. You know, we see the remembrance as a responsibility for all of us to make sure that we continue to tell the story, and that we impart to the next generation, like, what it was like that day. And that's part of our education symposium in June, is helping educators know how to teach the story and to make sure that, you know, they're equipped and they take care of themselves as they're teaching the story. So, and I hope that when you go to the visitor center, that you pay attention to the tributes and pay attention to the collections that are in there. I think every time I go through there, I see something that I didn't notice before. And Betsy and I were in there the other week, and it was like, oh, I don't remember this. And look at this fork. Why is this fork this way? So it's kind of interesting. I think you look at the collections a little differently once you hear a curator's perspective on how they're collected. So Betsy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Donna. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. Okay. Well, I hope you find the rest of your visit meaningful. I know it's a dreary day. If we tried to get the sun to shine, but my powers just weren't working this morning.
Above our pay grade.
Exactly.
Trivia question.
Sure.
Did United ever retire the number 93? They did.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Betsy.
Oh, my
And
pleasure.
Donna.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thanks for coming.
Yes, for teach to remember, I'm studying in the charter in several schools.
Yep.
Okay.
Anybody who's on our list, if you have.
Well, we were, and then we ran over here,
That's
so we're going.
Just end up.
We were dinner and a friend, her daughter teaches. Oh, they have your card in my purse. So I gave her one. She asked me a question. I said, I know somebody who likes that. She's gonna.